right. Hi, you guys. Welcome back to MDM Real Talk. I am Mackenzie.
I'm Darian.
And I'm Marissa.
And this is MDM Real Talk. And we will be talking about a specific article that we posted on our page. If you haven't read it yet, it's in the link in our bio on our Instagram. But it's about simple catchphrases that our parents used to use as a way to discipline us. For example, why are you crying? I'll give you something to cry for. When we go into the store, don't look at nothing, don't touch nothing, those type of things, and how those statements affected us as a child and how they are still currently affecting us as adults. So just to start this off, what are we all drinking?
Water.
Carbonated water.
Oh,
okay. I am drinking tea. Oh, not caffeinated, but tea. I already have my 5 o'clock coffee. So here we go.
What kind of tea? Is it herbal? Is it fruity?
It's herbal tea with, I think it's like a cinnamon apple spice type of thing.
Ooh,
so
that sounds
good for the holidays. Yeah.
Yes, a little festive. I'm feeling, I love it.
But let's go ahead and dive in, you guys.
Cool. So let's just kind of talk about out of all of the lines that she talked about in the article that moms say, what is the one that stuck out to you guys the most, that resonated with you all?
So for me, the one that stuck out for me the most is the stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry for. I think that statement affected me as a child because if there was something that I didn't understand what I was doing and I was crying about it, telling me to stop crying, and you've already given me something to cry for. Either I'm doing something that you don't like and it's bothering me or something like that. But now as an adult, it affects me because I guess I never really had or know when that space is okay to cry, or was I ever given that space to cry or to really feel what I'm feeling. I was always told to just kind of push it to the side. So I think that's one of the main statements that's stood out for me the most.
Yeah, I agree. That's the one that I got the most. And I was a very emotional kid. I was a crybaby for sure. So I was always crying. And yeah, it was definitely you don't have anything to cry about, I'll give you something to cry about. And I'm like, okay, but you already did give me something to cry about. That's crying. So I don't understand. And I think as an adult, as you get older, you start to be like, okay, I need validation for my feelings. So I need someone to be like, oh yeah, it's okay to cry, even though you shouldn't need someone else to tell you it's okay to cry. So that one I got the most. And also the do it just because I said so. No explanation, just oh, you need to do this. And it's why? Because I said so. It's to a certain extent, I feel that, as an adult and it's your kid and they should just do what you say. But I feel like sometimes it would be nice as a kid to have
to know why.
Right. Why am I doing this?
Exactly. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to do it. And I feel like, especially in the Black community, Black parents take that as a sign of disrespect, asking why. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, it can be disrespectful depending on how you say it and why you're saying it. But
if you're why? Then they're exactly. All right.
Why you do it? That's disrespectful. But if you're asking, I really don't get why I have to do this, or why you're asking me to do this, there may be something else going on. Why do I have to do this if I'm going to do it tomorrow and I'm going to have to do it twice? There may be another reason. And I feel like kids often, I can speak for myself especially, I grew up not really questioning authority a whole lot. So I would always follow the rules, and I'm okay, if this is what we're supposed to do, this is what we're going to do, we're not going to deviate. And then you start to see that in other aspects of your life. So in the workplace, when you're there and they're telling you to do something, and in your head you might be like, that's not my job, why am I doing that? Susie should be doing that. But you're trained to not question authority. Just do it, even though it really should be Susie's job. I'm over here doing it, and then in my head I'm mad. I'm I should have just asked why, or stood up for myself, but I didn't. So yeah, those two are probably the top two for me.
Right. And I also feel as a kid, I was a very inquisitive kid. So I wasn't necessarily challenging your your, I guess, command. It was more just like, well, why? Like, why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Like, why? Like, you know, and I think automatically people are just like, no, don't ask. Just do.
Sorry. I have a dog in the room, even though I closed the door. So I'm just trying to understand the ghost that decided to enter my room at the moment. Hello. Apparently, no privacy in a house with an older dog. The one that stuck out to me the most would be the "I brought you into this world and I'll take you out." I heard that a lot growing up, whether it was my mom saying it or my dad or my grandma, or if my mom heard it on TV, she'd be like, yep, totally, I understand that one. But mainly if I got into like serious trouble, like if I just did something way out of pocket, I spoke out of turn, but it's still kind of just like, it didn't so much stick with me now, though, I think, because I don't think my parents would ever do something tragic to physically take me out of this world. I think it was more so just instilling that fear in me, like I could get you if I wanted to, type thing. But as a kid, you don't know that, like, they're really not going to do anything bad to you for real. It's really just they want you to understand what you did was wrong. And whether it's a look or the tone in which they're using, then that's going to register with you. So it was more of a learning process for me, not so much that I was scared for my life type thing. But I think that's also where it kind of, there's a little fine line, little gray area with that. Because if you say it to a kid who may not get the meaning behind it, they might actually think that you would do something to you depending on how your attitude is. Like if you have threatened them with violence and then follow it up with violence, or they've seen you be violent, then it's kind of just like, oh, maybe they'll really take me out of this world. And so I think it's not a trend I feel like should be continued, especially because kids do take it so literally, and the world is so evolving that, when we were little, the phrase was like, our parents are their parents, and their parents said that to them, and so they're saying it to us. But clearly nothing truly bad came out of it because we're all still here, physically, but mentally that could have an effect on certain kids.
Right. And I think I feel like the purpose of those statements, obviously, like you said, were to discipline us, to kind of get us to stop doing whatever we were doing. However, I think that the reason why that those phrases are so common, other than the obvious reason that they've been passed down and passed down and passed down, but also just like our parents are only given 18 years to work with us, to essentially mold us and shape us to who they want us to be, or just to be able to function in the world. And I think those statements, even though they are harsh, they get the point across very quickly and they stick with you. And I think now that we're older, yes, those statements do affect us. However, I think in our generation, we are more open to dealing with how those things affected us. You know what I'm saying? Like whether it's going to therapy or talking about it or something like that, or even just admitting like, yeah, actually that's a reason why I can't cry, because my mom used to say that to me all the time. And just being aware, I think that's a huge step of just being aware of that there was a problem. But I don't know if necessarily like we should be upset with our parents or anything like that, because like I said, there's only so much time that they have with us. Right. And it's cut up between school, practices, games, musicals, musical rehearsal, whatever. Like, so I don't know.
So here's where I differ a little bit in that I think it is okay to be upset with your parents if you're working through something. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
you should allow yourself to feel all of those feelings. So if you are unearthing some things and you're like, wow, you know what? I really didn't like that my mom or my dad did X, Y, and Z in my childhood. But you're working through it, like, allow yourself to feel that. Allow yourself to be angry, allow yourself to be sad, allow yourself to be frustrated, confused, curious, and then proceed to work through that. Like, don't
Uh-huh.
sit in it. Because to your point, Mackenzie, they've only got 18 years. And as you said as well, like, majority of that time is not even spent with them one-on-one. Like, they get us on the weekends and after school. And half that time after school is somebody cooking dinner, we eat, and then everybody's getting ready for the next day. Like, that's the routine. You know what I mean? So do we have time to thoroughly break down everything? Not all the time. And I think it's important to acknowledge, as you said as well, like, I know for me, and obviously for you too, like, it's coming from a place of love. Like, it's coming
Mm-hmm.
from there's a lesson that I've already learned that I don't want you to have to learn. So I'm telling you this quick little thing because I don't have time to explain it, but it's important for you to know. And as a kid, you're like, okay, I don't know what this is. And then you get older, and if you actually explore it, there's like, oh, there's a meaning behind that. Like, you told me
Mm-hmm.
not to cry because you didn't want me to go around in life crying about every single thing, and really no one cares. Like, after you get out into the real world, no one cares. You might find a couple of friends that you really mesh with and those people that care about you, but like in the workplace, just out in the world, like, it's a cold world out there. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that they,
It is, man.
we're saying that, like, now that I've worked on it and worked through it, it's like, okay, I see the message now.
Mm-hmm.
And it
But
was an important one.
mm-hmm. You know what? It kind of reminds me of the kid or the child who tries to touch the hot stove. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the baby reaches out for the stove. Mom says, ah, ah, and the baby freaks out and they don't understand what's going on. They just know they did something wrong. Then years later or whatever, when they figure out what hot versus cold is, it's like, oh, that's why I don't touch the stove, as opposed to it being, I think the same concept applies to these topics here. They're just more in depth. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't cry because it shows weakness in some aspect of it. Or don't cry right now because you have these things to deal with. And then, as opposed to finding time to cry and figuring that part out, I don't think that step was ever taken. But I think we're kind of coming to the whole fruition of the why they were saying those things as opposed to us just doing it, you know? Does that make sense?
I think it's also good that we, now that we're older and adults and we're like cycling back to those moments as a kid and working through them as adults, I think it's important that we communicate those feelings to our parents. And I think oftentimes that doesn't happen in the Black community, which is why a lot of these sayings and situations get passed down because no one's truly addressing the problem. And I think that's also a taboo in the Black community where it's like you don't discuss your feelings, your childhood, or anything bad that might have happened. You just let it be and keep going, and you don't work through it. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because that translates and through all aspects of your life. I mean, I'm working through some of that now with just my parents, and especially my mother, um, and saying that, well, when I was younger, you did this, and this is how it affected me. And I'm not blaming you for anything, but I'm telling you this is how I viewed myself or have handled certain situations just because of what happened when I was younger. And I'm sure she had situations in her adulthood that happened when she was a child that she's now working through. But I feel like our parents are working through them now, which is much, much later than us, because now they feel like they can work through it instead of feeling like they could have worked through it when they were our age. And so I would hope that when I have kids, that if I did something to them You know, whether it's in that moment or weeks later or what have you, they would tell me sooner that it affected them, so I can make the change then and now, instead of years later they're out the house and married or what have you. But I think it starts with us, is creating that open door of communication, and that become a trend instead of these sayings, and telling your kids why they're doing something and what have you. And I think that's part of it. I mean, watching my little cousins and their parents, if their kids ask them why, for the most part they tell them, unless it's like a truly adult reason that they just cannot know about. But until they're older. But, you know, for the most part, if they're like, well, why do I have to do this and that? They're like, well, because you want to be able to keep a clean home, or, you know, when you come home, you do your work, you do whatever leftover homework you do because it creates a good work ethic. And, you know, they're explaining those things instead of because I said so. You know?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think a big part of that too is changing the narrative that telling a parent that you don't like something that they did is not disrespectful. Like, it's just me sharing feelings. So
Exactly.
those should be honored, whether you agree with it or not, or whether it's easy for you to hear or not, because it was hard for me to say it. And to what I was saying before, like, and Mackenzie, like, we don't want to sit in that anger. And it's hard, I feel like, especially in the Black community, to like, I don't even want to say get permission, but like for it to be okay for you to be upset at a parent. Like, that's so taboo too. Like, that's your mom. Like, you don't get mad at your mom. You don't do that because she's done X, Y, and Z for you. She's done this. And it's like, just because there's some things she did that I didn't like doesn't take away from the enormous amount of things that she did that I am like forever grateful for. Like, I couldn't pay her back if I tried. Like, there is no listen. No. So I think that's important to note. And then also realizing that as you get older, which no one talks about, you have to look at your parents as people. And that is so odd. Like, they are human beings navigating this world just as we are. They've just been doing it longer. And honestly, that is like, when you start to think about that, it's mind blowing, because I'm like, but you're mom and dad, but you're superheroes, but you know everything. But you like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, to this day, if I ask my mom something and she don't know, I'm like, well, if you don't know, nobody knows.
Then nobody knows.
I was like,
nobody knows.
Google don't know, because if you don't know, then
no, like, you don't know. Or, you know, when they start to be like, okay, well, you got to start doing your own. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't want to do this anymore? Like, I don't. So I think for so long they are our superheroes, and we're blessed, those of us who get to look at them that way, because they have probably acted in that way for us, you know, made things happen. We don't think about how food gets on the table. We don't think about how we get gifts. We don't think about how we get to school. Like, it just happens. And that's not everybody's story, but I know for the three of us, it has been. And so it's like, your parents just do. And we're just, okay, great. So you know everything and you do everything and you're a superhero. And then you get older and you start to realize things and work through things, and maybe they make decisions or say things that you don't like, and you're like, but a superhero wouldn't do that. Or a superhero wouldn't do that. And it's like, you have to go through this mind-boggling realization of like, oh, you are another woman walking through the world figuring life out too. Like, I thought you had it figured out, but you don't. You're just figuring it out too.
Yeah.
Right. I'm about to say, like, I think I had my first moment of realization with that was when it was Irma or the hurricane, and I was trying to figure out what to do, like where to go, how I was gonna move, and I called my dad because I automatically, like, if there's a storm, I always call him, and I'm like, Dad, what do? I don't know what to do. I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do with my dog. He's like, well, you know, honestly, I would have been gone a week ago, but here we are, and I'm like, oh, well, now. What?
That's great. Thanks, Dad.
What?
Yeah.
And I just like, no help? You're like, well, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you know, you got.
Not that there's a natural disaster going on or anything, but
No.
But that's when you're like, oh, you know, and that's how he would handle those situations. And now I've crossed a barrier that, like, it's no man's land. Nobody knows what to do because he wouldn't have been in the situation because he would have been gone. So, like, then it's like, where do you go? Google? Google?
hey, Alexa.
Yes, what is it? And like when your parents start letting you make mistakes on your own, like they don't.
Oh God, that's annoying.
Like, yeah, it's like I'll be like, Mom, such and such happened, and then I did this, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do now. My mom's like, yeah, I don't know why you did that. I definitely wouldn't have done that. And I'm like, where were you when you could have told me not to let that happen? Like, where were you? So moments like that, I'd be like, wow, you really not holding my hand no more. And we just be so, well, most of us get so excited to like be grown and like grow up and blah, blah, blah. Sis.
Oh no. I had that moment. Do you remember when I
What a birds.
blew up my car tire?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. We turned that corner and that way the whole thing was off the rim. It was just bad. Well, you know, my first thought is, Mom, Dad, help me. And they go, you're not gonna get it towed to the Ford place. All right. Where do I get a tow number from? I don't know. Here you go. I got one. Okay, thanks. Well, it's gonna cost me about $700. Damn. Damn. Like, what?
A little more help, please.
I mean, like that's what happens with your car. Cars. What happens when you own a car? You know, these things happen, and I'm like in panic mode. Like, okay, how do I open a credit card with no credit?
Yeah.
But I think that's what makes life. I mean, you've reached that point with your parents where they'll be there for you in the big situations and in the small ones, but not so much in the sense that like they're so invested in your life as they were when you were little, and they had to be because they had to control every second of your day and your schedule. But
that's kind of why I feel like these little sayings were created in the beginning, like because they just were just ways so that we could, I don't know, have a solution, you know, like just really quickly. And I feel like, granted, our problems have now changed because there's a whole bunch of things that are happening to me in 2020 that never happened to anybody else in my family. So I don't think that's why these sayings hold as much water as they used to, because as a generation, we are more inquisitive. We want to know because literally everything is at our fingertips. So it's
kids are born with iPads in their hand. It's like
right, like so it's like those quick little because I said so sayings are no longer enough, because it's like, well,
hey Alexa, why
I
do
can
I
just
have
Google
to do
it
this?
if I'm being honest with you. Like I can just Google it. If you don't want to tell me why, I'll just go to YouTube.
I feel like that's even scarier though, in my opinion, because then it's like that makes your job as a parent, I would feel, even harder, because now they have so much access to things. You know, we still grew up in the towards the end of dial-up, you know? So if we wanted to turn on the computer, we had to wait at least 30-45 minutes for that thing to boot up, and then still kind of had to wait because the internet was slow as I don't know.
That loud noise that used to go.
The AOL was slow, boy.
Oh, AOL, boy.
So I mean,
AOL, instant messenger, whatever it was.
AIM. Yeah, AIM. You wasn't lit unless you had an AIM.
Okay.
But now they got iMessage and WhatsApp and they even have kids Facebook Messenger now. Like, that's how crazy all of this is for them. Like, I'm scared that eventually when I have kids, will there be a need for me besides the fact of giving them life? You know?
Oh no, I think there will always be a need for parents because, I mean, in general, like parents provide that comfort for their child. There is nurturing there. I just don't know if the way that we discipline our children will continue to stay the same.
I
And I
don't
think
think
that
I can't say yes or no to that. I would want to evolve it. Like, I don't want my kid to hate me, although I can't control that if they're a teenager and going through hormones and stuff. But like, I'm a stern person anyway, and I know I get that from my mom and my grandmother. And I've learned that being a camp counselor and a dance teacher. Just, I have that look. I could look at a child and they know, like, oh, I need to stop. Like, and I find myself saying things to kids that my grandparents or my mom and dad told me as a disciplinarian when I was in trouble. But I don't think I would take it to the extent that it has been taken. Like, I can't see myself saying, I brought you into this world, I'll take you out. Like, the actual phrase, but I think the feeling would still be the same.
I think it'll. I think the people that are having kids now, like our generation, which is so crazy that people our age are having children and married, it's still beyond me. Um, I think we're a little bit more open, one, to dealing with our own trauma, dealing with our own stuff, like really unpacking our own childhood, things that we liked, things that we didn't like, and making a solid effort to treat the children that come after us differently. But it definitely is going to have to be like an intentional thing because, when you don't, things will just roll over. And truthfully, like therapy is much more mainstream now than like it's ever been. Like obviously there's like the stigma with therapy and I think it's starting to not be as much of a thing, but it definitely was a thing. Like you were crazy if you were going to therapy, especially in Black families. You just, somebody pray for you and you're going to be just fine, like whatever. And so I think now that it's more mainstream and we're trying to break down that stigma of therapy means something's wrong with you when really like therapy is for everyone. And I heard this saying that's like, people go to therapy because of the people in their life that don't go to therapy. And that is like so accurate to me because if everyone just went to therapy and figured out all of their just stuff, we would so much better communicate like our feelings. We would be more honest with each other. It would just be like, here's where I'm at. Either you can meet it or you can't, but we're moving on. If not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that starts in the home.
I agree. And that's why I'm saying like parents our age and after us, I think are going to open that door more. Like you said, that open door policy with their kids. Like you can tell me if I do something that you don't like. Respectfully, don't get crazy. But let's have that conversation so that I can alter what I'm saying. And okay, actually let me ask this question. How do you guys feel about, and none of us are parents, so take this with a grain of salt.
Disclaimer.
Yeah, really speaking here. But
screen.
how do you guys feel about parents apologizing? Do you feel like it's necessary? Do you feel like it's
like to their kids?
Yes.
I feel like in certain aspects it's necessary. Like if a child blatantly disrespected you and so you raised your voice or got mad or got angry, there's no need to apologize for that because they was in the wrong to begin with. But if a child did something wrong and maybe you took it out of proportion or said something you didn't mean to, and you could tell that it affected them mentally, I feel like the apology would help because it would show that they're they're still accepted as a person. And I feel like it would continue to open that dialogue, because then that conversation could be, well, I know I was wrong, mom and dad, but this is what happened. This is why I did this. Can you tell me why you don't want me to do that, or what you've gone through, so I can better understand why it was wrong and what have you. It makes them feel like a person too. And I think often we don't get that apology until later on in life, when it kind of just doesn't feel like it matters at that point, because the damage is already done. But I feel like parents, and again, not a parent, but from my perspective, it feels like some parents just feel like, well, I'm the parent, what I say goes, and it doesn't matter what I say, they should just take it. But you're both humans, and if someone who is your age told you what you told them, you would feel a certain way about that. So why wouldn't it hold true to someone, even if they're younger than you or on a different level mentally? Because if it doesn't affect them as deep as it does, then it will come back later. But I think we don't plan for the proactive in parenting. It's just in the moment, we're not looking at how it's going to affect our children down the road. It's like, is wrong, and this is how I'm going to treat you, and this is how I'm going to discipline you, and you just going to have to deal with it. But then 15, 20, 30 years later, you're 40 and you're having the same issues because you couldn't deal with them when you were younger. So it's rocky, because your parent's not your friend, but they can grow into your friend, but they still have to be a parent. So I think it's a gray area and a fine line. I think it depends on the situation and the context that it's relayed.
And Mackenzie doesn't agree.
I don't know. Like I said, it's a very slippery slope. I agree that there should be space to talk about whatever the issue is. I do agree with that. I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to think about that a little bit more, just because, like, I feel like the reason why parents don't apologize now is because there is some taboo of admitting that you're wrong and you don't know everything. Because as a child, I feel like the moment you start to speak, you're always like low-key like questioning your parents' authority, like when you're 2, you're saying no. Like, what do you mean no? When you're 14, you have a whole brain and you're like actually thinking, and like, so I just it's hard, because I think in the household there's always a constant battle of authority, even though you know your parents are the authority figure, you're always trying to test their limits, even if you're not trying to. I feel like, or you're not being intentional with it. I feel like you're always trying to, well, how far can I push you? How far can I push you? How far can I push you? How far? And I think that's just how people grow up. So it's like really hard when you think if your parents would apologize, because like I feel like on their end they would be admitting defeat, like, I was wrong this time, and like that whole, like, I don't know. I do agree that there does need to be space to talk about it, but like, I think, okay, if it's something simple, like, I told you to be at the car at 6. Mom, I couldn't be at the car at 6 because I had to talk to my teacher at 5. Okay, sorry for yelling. That's one thing. It's another thing, like, I don't know. That's a hard one. I'm sorry. What do you think, Jerry? That's a hard one.
I'm not saying you have to apologize to, like, a 2-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 12-year-old. But I feel like by the time they're 16 on up, when they have a pretty good understanding of themselves and kind of understand the gist of the world and what goes on, then I feel like that give and take can start happening, because they're picking up on things now in an adult situation than they would when they were younger. And then by the time they're our age, you know, if my mom did something wrong to me, now that I am older and I know what's right and wrong and how a person should be treated, that I I would expect my mother to apologize if she wronged me. Just like I would apologize if I've wronged her. We have that relationship and we're realizing that we're both human. It's not, I feel like, yeah, like to the point from earlier, we're realizing that our humans, our parents are humans. Our humans are
Those
parents.
things.
But then realizing that their kids are humans too, and they go
Yeah.
through issues and situations, and so, but it is still hard because I can see it in their face if I'm like, I didn't like that you did this. So, my dad will sit there forever silent because he doesn't, he want to be stubborn and not say, yeah, I was wrong. He'll mumble it.
But and I think there's also the idea that like, so I actually do know something. Like, like it's when you're a kid, it's like I know nothing. You know everything, you're teaching me. But now at 27, like, and gone to college, got a degree, got 2 degrees, like I know a little something, something. So like at least give me a little bit of credit.
Well, I blame you.
What I'm saying?
You taught me.
Like and I think that concept is actually very important, because I feel like it's one thing to take, I feel like it's hard if your parents don't take you seriously, how do you expect the world to take you seriously?
So
you know what I'm saying?
I guess like there's a line between parent and child, and there are things that your parents are able to do because they're your parents, and that's just how it goes. But I think parents should apologize to their children if they have wronged them. And now, again, I'm not saying every single day, I'm sorry, like, no, but I feel like hearing that as a child is validating in a way. Like, you shouldn't have to be validated by your parents, but like it is like, okay, you care about my feelings, and I feel like you and your parents will never be on an even playing field on all aspects, but I feel like emotionally there should be some kind of, like, at the end of the day, your feelings do matter, and if I hurt your feelings, I apologize for that. Now, this is why I did what I did, because you're about to jump off that cliff and die, so that's why I hemmed you up and I yelled at you.
And that's how I brought you in this world.
Like I feel like the apology is more for like, I'm sorry how that made you feel, but I did it for a reason, because I love you and I care about you, and I was worried that something's going to happen to you. I'm trying to teach you this lesson. I feel like you're not getting it, so I lost my cool and I yelled at you, and I'm sitting here crying because I don't know why you yelled at me and it hurt my feelings. But then you apologize like, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings, but this is why I did what I did. I did it with this intention. And I feel like that kind of dialogue goes a long way when you're thinking about, does my mom care about how she just made me feel? And even like later on in life. So even when you were saying, Marissa, you were talking to, or now you're figuring out like how to tell your mom, hey, maybe I didn't really like how you did this or how you did that. And I've had those conversations with my mom and my dad too. And hearing an apology really means a lot, because it's like, okay, you're acknowledging the fact that you did do something, although it may have been well intentioned, it did hurt my feelings, and that's valid regardless of how old I am. You know what I mean? But when you're 6 or 12, you don't really know how to have that conversation. You just know mom's mad, dad's mad because I did something that I didn't know was wrong. Now my feelings are hurt, and they left, and I'm sitting here crying in my bedroom, and I don't really know why I got in that much trouble,
Right. And I also think that, like, now that I'm really thinking about it, I feel like that also, with without that kind of space to talk about things, I think it feeds into the wanting to please everybody aspect of like my personality or anybody's personality. Like, I don't know what's wrong, but I want you to be happy. So I'm going to try and do everything that I can, as opposed to, okay, this is what I did wrong. I won't do that specific thing again. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that feeds into, without having that space of conversation or communication, I think it does feed into that type of, I don't know, personality trait, I guess would be the word. I don't know.
I think.
Sorry.
Okay. I to piggyback off of that, something that I started doing as a child too is like avoiding confrontation. So like, I didn't want to make my parents mad, so I'm like, okay, well, they said this, I'm just gonna do it real quick. I'm gonna stop what I'm doing because they said to do this, and I don't want to hear anybody yell. I don't want to hear anybody be upset. So I'm just gonna do it, rather than like questioning, being like, hey, can I do it in a second because I'm doing this, or can I, like, I'm asking you a question because I don't really understand, but actually I don't really want to have like this confrontational kind of thing because I don't want it to be a thing. So I'm just gonna try to do it and get it done and make you happy and keep it moving. And so it like, and again, I mean, because our parents are the first people we have relationships with. So that leads into like so many other aspects.
Everything else, yeah.
Like whether it be a partner, whether it be at work, whether it be with friends, like then I started to avoid confrontation altogether. Like I really don't want to make anybody upset. I don't want to, you know what I mean? So then you have to like break that down. And when I tell you, that is hard to like feel something and then you're like, okay, no, we're not going to push that aside. We're going to address it with this person. And that's a difficult habit to break. Just like letting things go and just like, it's okay. We don't need a conversation. It's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's okay. And there's flames everywhere. But you're just like, everything is okay.
Really? My little angry meme. Yeah. That's my life. The little angry meme.
Literally, that's all I can think about. As soon as she said that, I just saw that picture.
Yes.
But yeah, I also think that there's a sense of stubbornness too, because we're a product of our parents. We have their DNA in us. So a lot of our personality traits are things that they have. So I feel like when they get upset at us, a lot of the times it's because it's something they've done or would have done, and it's more of a projection of like, dang it, why did they do this? They're doing it because I did it, but they don't know that I did it. And so now I'm mad because I couldn't stop them from doing it. Yeah, essentially. Because I've had moments I've done something and my dad gets so bad and he'll yell at me and I'm like, oh my God, like what? And my dad has this like roaring voice when he's mad, like it echoes throughout the house. You can feel it. But I get mad and he'll come back like hours later the next day and be like, I was just really upset because I've done it and I've been through that, and you know, I just don't want you to go through that. And I'm like, if you had just said that like first and like save the tears and the mascara running, like we could have been having this conversation like 3 hours ago. But I think that's because parents, they're like, they don't want to see you make the same mistakes that they did. But communicating that can be hard because you still want to have that authority line where like, oh, I'm this way and you have to do this and blah blah blah, I'm the parent and I don't want you to see my vulnerability side because then you can take advantage of me. And it's like, but they're a child. That is humanly impossible unless you allow that to happen, you know. But that just shows us that what we did, it happened. It's a learning experience, is the phrase my father always loves to use. And we work through it then instead of years later.
And also, I just to go back to what you said, Darian, about our parents being our first relationship that we had. Like, so if anytime when you were growing up that there was confrontation, so your mom's mad at you, dad's mad at you, and you try and stand up for your side and they shut you down just because I said so, whatever. Like, imagine going to school and like a girl who is your age or a guy or whatever who is your age, your peer, and there's confrontation. Like, how are you supposed to handle that? You know what I'm saying? Because you don't even have an example of how to handle that. And even the examples that are like on TV, like people are fighting or like it's a whole lot of just drinks being thrown. Like, so I think feeding into the whole passive aggressive thing was definitely a huge aspect of, because how do you learn how to deal with those things if you can't even do them in your own house, you know?
You don't, and it translates into your life. I mean, I can say firsthand, I'm that first person who has an issue. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to tell you how I'm feeling, because then it's going to open a can of worms that I don't know I can handle, you know. But it started in the house, you know. Something happened, and I didn't want to cause any trouble. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to start an argument. I'm be out your hair. I'm just going to be in my room and be alone and deal with it in my head. And that's not healthy. That's not good. That doesn't work, because at some point you're going to break.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to get to that boiling point. And that's why a lot of us are in therapy, to try to figure out how to break down those boiling points so that we can simmer a little bit, you know, be toasty, but not, you know, burning.
Nailed it.
That's why I'm a writer.
So that concludes this episode of MDM Real Talk. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Instagram. Like, subscribe, all in the places, all of that. And we look forward to seeing you guys here next Wednesday. Have a good one. And we out.